I'm John Charles from the Poison Pen, and I'm delighted to have with us two of our very favorite authors. We're going to discuss their latest works. But before we begin, a brief commercial message. If you're interested in Paige's books or Jenn's books, we would love to have you order them from the Poison Pen. Feel free to do that either by giving us a phone call or going on the web. We'll be happy to send out copies or copy to you. And without further ado, let me welcome Jenn McKinlay and Paige Shelton. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Okay, my first question for both of you is, tell us a little bit about yourselves before you became best-selling authors and literary icons. And why don't we start with Jenn?
I was going to send it to Paige. A little bit about myself. Former, as you are, John, recovering librarian. Other than that, reader my whole life. Fell in love with writing as a kid, but didn't really know it. You know, I found my mom's old portable typewriter, and I used to report on the family to make some candy money. And then, weirdly, it didn't occur to me to be a writer till I was in my teens. And then my parents were all about the plan B. You know, when you say, I'm going to be a novelist, they were like, and your plan B is. So that kind of became being a librarian. And I was really fortunate, and I worked for the city of Phoenix just part-time, but for like 22 years. And that part-time gave me the opportunity to write books on the side. And, you know, it only took like, 10, 15 years to, break in.
Overnight success.
Yeah, totally.
What about you, Paige? Who were you before you became a writer?
Before I became a writer, I worked in advertising, but even before that, I moved around a whole bunch as a kid. My dad was a football coach, and I was born in a small town in Missouri, and we lived in the Midwest. We lived in a haunted house in New Mexico. We lived in Salt Lake City, or I moved to Salt Lake City after graduating from college in Des Moines. I always wanted to be a writer, but I never really thought, kind of like Jenn's parents had a plan B. I just kind of thought in my head, I didn't know I could say I was a writer. I was going to need a plan B. So I worked in advertising, did some copywriting, but also some advertising sales for the newspaper agency in Salt Lake City. And that was fun to be part of the newspaper industry. When I started, we were pasting up ads like with rubber cement and putting things on boards for the ads. And by the time I finished, we were on computers. So that was really fun. I had a lot of fun jobs and career experience on the way to becoming a writer. It took me 13 years once I got started, once I wanted to become serious about this writing thing, but 13 years before I was published.
And what I thought was interesting when I was doing a deep dive into both of your backgrounds was that you started out as writers in the romance genre, but you took different paths. Tell us a little bit about that. Let's start with you this time, Paige.
Sure. Well, when I did want to take this seriously, it was 1997, and I was in Salt Lake City, Utah. And so I thought, well, maybe I can find a writers group somewhere that will help me and help me understand the business. The only one I could find in Salt Lake City was the Utah Romance Writers. And so I called, at the time, Sherry Lewis was the local president, who later became president of the big romance writers. But she answered her phone. She was unloading her groceries from her car, and she's talking on her phone. And I'm like, I really don't know romance, but I want to be part of writers group. And so she was very encouraging and had me join. And I have to say, even though romance wasn't for me and I ended up switching to mystery, that group, the Utah group, that local group, was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was wonderful to be around people who all were writers or wanted to be writers. You could hear a little bit about the business, about publishing. You could hear about the rejection that you were bound to get, and I got. And it was just a great support system. So though I found that romance writing wasn't for me, I switched over to the mystery genre because that's really what I read, was mystery, and things didn't really become easy. They just made more sense when I started doing that. So that's kind of the route I took, starting with the romance because they were the ones there, but ending up in mystery.
How about you, Jenn?
Very similar. when I was like 16, I think I saw the movie Romancing the Stone, and I tell this story all the time, but it was the first time I ever saw a writer, like it never occurred to me before that there's someone on the other side of the book, doing the work. So when I saw that movie, it was, oh, that's what I want to do. So I made that mistake of thinking romance is easy. And like Paige said, if a genre is not for you, it's not easy. It's hard because it's not natural. And when I was younger, I don't think it was natural. I did sell my first rom-coms to Harlequin back in like 2002, I think. And I had started seriously writing in 92. So it was about 10 years of being a member of RWA, just like Paige, going to the meetings, and the thing that was great about RWA, this is where I really, because I never took classes in school, I studied library science because I just thought, how hard can writing be? So I never took classes. I just thought it was kind of an organic, kind of slow on the uptake. But the one thing RWA did, and I think they still do, although I'm no longer a member, is they had contests. So you could send in your first chapter and like 3 published authors. And not only would they, enter you in the contest, they would like edit it. And that's where I learned I had major point of view problems. And but also they would give you that, you have a voice. I see a voice in there amidst all the grammar problems. And it was super encouraging. So I did end up publishing some romantic comedies with Harlequin, and then that didn't take. So then I discovered Murdering People. So it's a journey.
Okay, now let's jump forward and we'll talk about your new books, the books that brought you here today. So let's start with you, Jenn, For Better or For Worse.
I know, it's crazy. I have a picture of it, or I have it. Yay!
Ooh.
It's the 13th Cupcake Bakery Mystery, which is unbelievable to me, the Baker's Dozen. I really thought this would be a 3-book series. So for those who've been following, there's the main protagonist is Melanie Cooper, and she's been with Joe DeLaura pretty much for the whole series. But, there's been some bumps in the road, and, for better or worse, maybe they will, maybe they won't. We'll find out.
Paige, what about your new book, Deadly Additions?
Deadly Additions is, let's see, I think it's somewhere over here. Oh, over there. Anyway, it is the 6th book in the Scottish Bookshop series. And with each of the Scottish Bookshop books, I like to try to bring in some Scottish history or something, predominantly Scottish. So with this one, I bring in The Curious Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Yes, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I lost it there for a second. By Robert Louis Stevenson. And it was a novella written in the late 1800s that, of course, changed everything about literature. And there is so much in Edinburgh, in Scotland, that is about Stevenson, that is about Jekyll and Hyde. There are pubs that are inspired by the book, by the people who inspired the story, people who murdered their wives, people who went about poisoning people. It was, the story was actually supposedly inspired by a number of real life situations. So that works perfectly well with, bringing in a murder mystery and perhaps some other poisonings or killings along the way.
I think a lot of readers would be surprised to find out that when you're writing contemporary mysteries, you do have to do research. It's not just making things up, though Jenn does like to do that. But in this case, let's talk a little bit about your research for books. And we'll start with you, Paige. You mentioned Robert Louis Stevenson and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. What did you discover while you were writing this book that surprised you about the author, about the book, about?
Well, a whole bunch of things. I mean, what I wanted to bring into it was we all have the Jekyll Hyde in our culture nowadays. We all know what that means. We all know that is an outward appearance of good, but something else is going on behind the curtain, something else more evil. Well, it was fun to look at that from the viewpoint of people who this was new to them. This story was new to them when they first read it, and it took off like wildfire. And it was fun to put myself in the place of people who had never heard the Jekyll Hyde reference before, and the twist was new. I learned that Stevenson probably wrote it, even though it was a novella, it wasn't a full-length novel. He wrote it in probably 3 days, which I thought was astounding. He was awakened from a dream by his wife because he was screaming. He was dreaming the first bad encounter of the book that he ended up writing. And his wife woke him up, and he said, "Why did you wake me up? I was dreaming the best book ever." Well, you were screaming. Yeah, yeah. So it was such a, you always hear, or you hear some writers say, I was just the conduit for the story sometimes. And I really felt like Stevenson was the conduit for that story. I think it was hugely inspired by the people around him and his life, his imagination. And he was the person at the right time to bring forth the story. And it's here forever. It's definitely forever.
How about you, Jen? What kinds of
I love that. I had no idea. Now I have such total envy for Robert Louis Stevenson. You dreamt it? That's so annoying.
Yeah.
But oh, brilliant. Totally brilliant. Mine, for better or worse, it was my first, one of the characters takes a job in a resort. So, you know, when you're writing a cupcake bakery, it's all very contained. It's the, you know, and when I started the series, I toured some local small mom and pop type bakeries, because that's what it is. And one of the characters goes off to work at a resort, and there's an executive chef who gets murdered. And of course, he's a suspect because they just had an incident. But it was fun. I am, or was, I never know how to use that, a huge fan of Anthony Bourdain. And then Kitchen Confidential and the whole, you know, Escoffier's Brigade Kitchen. So when I put Oz in the resort, I had to like kind of double down on how they work the stations. And, you know, even though you do this, and Paige will probably say the same thing, you probably did a huge deep dive on Robert Louis Stevenson. And I know you did Mary Queen of Scots before, and you read tons about her. And then the amount that you actually use, it's like salt on, you know, whatever, like a little sprinkling. So, and the same thing with the kitchen. It's like I learned all the stations, I learned how they talk to each other, I learned all the brigade, you know, blah, 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 blah. And then I used to like that much. But the book would not be very good without it. So yeah, mine is mostly Brigade Kitchens, Escoffier. Thank you, Anthony Bourdain. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Now, would it be fair to say that those of us who live in Scottsdale might be familiar with your thinly veiled Sundial resort in the book?
Probably. There's like little snippets of different resorts kind of like, you know, mashed up. Because if you use, you know, I'm pretty sure a real one doesn't want me to murder their executive chef. Just saying.
Is it challenging writing a book set in Scottsdale where you do have to?
It is, because, you know, and the thing for people who live here, I don't know if they've noticed or not, but I never ever say what street the bakery's on in Old Town, because I don't want people, that's a boot store. It's like, no. I did just read, I think it came out in the Arizona Republic, I'm not sure, but Scottsdale is number 2 favorite resorts for bachelorette parties.
Wow.
We're second to Nashville.
That's your next book?
Probably. I was just thinking, Music City, here I come.
What about you, Paige? Your books are set in Scotland. How do you research the setting there, especially the last year when you haven't been able to travel?
Right. Well, I've been to Scotland one time, unfortunately, just one time, but it was a fabulous trip, and it was a flurry of research and details, et cetera, so forth and so on. But I don't get it all right. And I know that, and I do hear from readers sometimes when, like, for instance, you know, I actually did get a message the other day that said, on that particular building, there are no numbers. The numbers are just on the ground in front of the building. And so I thought, well, I get, you know, I can't get all that. Even in person, I might not get all of that, but I would love to be more accurate. So of course I have the internet, and I have the pictures, and I have maps, which if I didn't have those without being there in Scotland, I think it would be very difficult to do. Yeah.
Now, both of your series are kind of qualified as cozy mysteries. What do you think are the necessary ingredients for a good cozy? And either of you jump in.
Rock, paper, scissors. Ready?
I'll call upon you. Okay, Jen, you start. You've been writing longer.
Cozies. I think I heard someone say it before, so I can't remember who, so I can't cite my source, but I thought they put it really well. And I think it was at one of your cozy cons, which you have one coming up on the 8th.
Saturday. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is I'll do a PSA for you.
Please do.
CozyCon is fantastic. It's a bunch of authors. Paige and I've done it before. We totally enjoy it. And you'll get to hear a lot of different authors and different books and different processes, and it's lots of fun, and you should pay attention and attend. Anyway.
We wanted to include both you and Paige, but your agents told us that you were too big now for multi-author events. So
yeah. You're cute.
Okay, back to the ingredients.
Paige is all Mary Higgins Clark nominee.
That's right.
They do. I think cozies are, this is what the person said, and I'm sorry, I can't remember. I'm old, and I think when you've written so many books, and Paige can be my witness to this, you cram so much stuff in there, it's just leaking out all over. So I don't know who said this, but I thought she was on point. Cozies are when you have a very nice normal world and something really bad happens, and then good versus evil at the end, and violence is off the page, and it's more of a puzzle where you're really trying to figure it out, and there's just a certain, it's murder, but it's nice. So there's a niceness to it. And I think cozies appeal to people who, like the British crime shows. They like to have logic and reason and good triumphs. It's not gonna work for your gallows humor, thriller, noir people, probably. I mean, they might like it to fall asleep to, but probably won't love it like the rest of us. What about you, Paige? What did I miss?
No, I think you're right on target. I think, the specific elements, a lot, most of them, I think, have an amateur sleuth. They all seem to have a hook. For instance, Jen's Cupcakes, My Scottish Bookshop. I think that's pretty typical in most of them. I think the definition's changing as well. I think I think mystery is mystery, and I think absolutely there are mysteries that are edgier or more graphic, etc. But I think that it feels like, to me, things are kind of coming together in a world where everything that people who like to read mysteries like to read mysteries. They like a wide variety, a wide different flavors. Some days they like the noir, some days they like the, more cozy, let's read by the fireplace type thing. So I think it's changing a little, but I think the elements of the amateur sleuth and the hook will be around a long time.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Mm-hmm. Both of you have written popular series, long-running series. As an author, what are the advantages to a series, and are there any disadvantages? We'll start with you this time, Paige.
With me? Okay. Well, I will say some of the advantages are, the characters, the people. You start to put together the stories in your head, and you're pretty familiar with how many of your characters are going to react. You know them pretty well, and it's always nice to visit with them. They are in our heads, and it's always nice to bring them to the page and bring them to life again. And it gives a consistency to a world. It is a world of creation that you have, that even though you can build upon it, it's just a nice place to go. Sometimes the disadvantages are, and I'll let Jen talk about this maybe even more, is, how many people can you kill in one place? So that sometimes. And what else, Jen?
I don't know. I have a list, so I'm fine with the killing so far.
So you're good.
I've only worked through half my issues. So
good. Okay.
No, I'm kidding. I think it's not so much how many, it's how. You don't want to get repetitive with I did weirdly a pie chart a couple of years ago. I should probably update it, but I wanted to know, because I'm currently writing my 50th book. Not all mysteries. I think like 10 or something. I don't know, 10 or 15 of those are romance. So, but a solid number of mysteries. so I did a pie chart on how I prefer to, murder my people. And I think it was blunt trauma, big winner. And then not so much on the shooting. So I'm writing a mystery now where there's a lot of shooting, and I'm very uncomfortable with it. Like, I really struggled to write it. And I think, because I'm kind of like, I'm not anti-gun, because I come from a family where hunting is fine and stuff like that. Like, yeah, cool. If you're going to eat it, don't leave it to rot in the woods. But like, shooting people is, I'm really struggling. Like, this is, so I was thinking I'm like, maybe I need to switch to poison, because the book was due like a month ago. So yeah, I'm sure they'll be fine with that. But, anyway, so I think for me is the method, the methods. It's, you don't want to be too repetitive in how you get rid of people. And, I'm sure every mystery writer probably has their preferred method, but yeah. I'm struggling. I tried to branch out. It's not comfortable. It's like a shirt that doesn't fit. I just don't like it. I don't like it. I'm much better with, blunt trauma, whack them on the head and like, whoops, But anyway, so those are my issues.
Do you ever find that having written series where there's a large number of installments, that readers are reluctant to pick up your new book because they feel they have to start at book 1?
Oh, I don't know. I have not heard that. I've heard people ask if they have to start at book 1, and then you're the series, because I think you're either a series reader or you're not. And if you're a series reader, I'm a series reader. I'm obsessive. I have to start with book 1. Like, it's not even a question. It's like I need to be, because this is the one good thing about series is the character arc goes through so many books. It's not just one book where they develop and then you just write the same character. It's like, if you're, and I think readers get frustrated when they're like, well, why was the couple together, apart, together, apart, together? What's like, well, I thought the series was 3 books, then they made it 6 books. It's like, sorry, And I think Paige has felt that too, where you're like going in thinking it's 3 and now it's 6, and then you're like, so I think it kind of depends on personality. I think some readers are fine picking up the 10th book, and other readers are compulsive and need to start on 1.
Well, as a writers, do you try, is it your goal with each book that it be complete in itself so that someone can come to that book and not have to be familiar with the others to enjoy it? Paige?
Well, I think I'm a fan of cliffhangers, so that's always good to to maybe leave a thread out there for something coming in the future. But I do think a complete book with some resolution or most things resolved is important. I also, I'm like Jen, I think it depends on the reader. Some people can go in to a series at book 7 or 10 or whatever and be just fine with it and pick right up with the characters and the personality. So I think it just depends upon the reader on that. But I think each book needs to have some resolution, although there can be cliffhangers.
Well, actually, I was going to say, Jen, you have a specific example in one of your series where you thought you were going to get to wrap it up and things changed, didn't they?
Yeah, all right. I think you're talking about the Hat Shop series where I thought, they were kind of cleaning house and they cleaned that one. And it was rough because I had just assumed, it'll go on forever. But and the 5th book, I think it was Assault and Beret, took place in Paris, and it was super fun to write. I even brought in characters from one of my writer for hires, just all the, because I'm big on the Easter eggs and the inside jokes. So like the summer book, Wait for It, of course, one of the characters at some point says, Paris is always a good idea, because of course she did. It's like, so if you read my stuff, you'll read one of my mysteries and it mentions, I think I even worked myself in, because, and I said something like, there's an author who's into bad breakfast choices, and one of the librarians is talking about her, and I'm like, but
Judith Krantz used to do that too.
Yeah, because it's fun, it's kind of like a to you and the reader. But now I totally forgot the question. What was it? Oh yeah, the Hat Shop. Sorry. Oh my God. They did end it, and then I had a little bit of time, and it was really bugging me that it didn't finish in London, because it's a London Hat Shop series. So I wrote a proposal and we kind of sent it in, and I had like a 2-month window with nothing to do, and I just kind of wrote it and it was super fun. And so now we got to go back to London. But now, hilariously, the readers are like, okay, where's the next one? And I'm like, so I don't know. We'll have to see. I need that 2-month window again. But we'll see.
Both of you have been writing for quite a while. We won't say how long. But using that experience, draw upon it, and what would you tell? There are a lot of people out there that are just starting out as writers. What is your advice to them? What would you say to them? I'll start with Jenn.
My advice, write every day. I mean, I think the thing that's the hardest thing when you start out writing is that every single cliche about writing is true. So we'll run through them. Write the book that you want to read. Write every single day. Kill your darlings. Just because you did all that research doesn't mean you get to put it all in the book. If you heard us before, you're going to use about that much. Go to conferences, meet people, network, enter contests, take a class for, be smarter than me. But I think the number one thing, and this is actually, she's a local author like Paige and I, Beth Kendrick has one of the best quotes I've ever heard about just the work part of it. And if you don't know her, she writes really funny romantic comedy, women's fiction type stuff. And she's had a few movies made and she's delightful. But what she used to say to me when I was complaining was, the harder I work, the luckier I get. And that's so true in writing, because you want to just keep firing out ideas and meeting people and going to conferences. And as Paige said, it's like when you go to these conferences, even if you're kind of an introvert, and most writers are, these are your people. Like, you'll find your people who just get you, and it's really truly amazing. And I have yet to meet, I mean, I'm sure they're out there, but I've been fortunate not to meet them. By and large, I would say 99.9% of all authors are super supportive. It doesn't matter what level they're on. They're always nice because they know what you're trying to do, and they're just full of respect no matter where you are in the game. So that's my advice.
Paige?
Well, I guess that's all perfect. The thing I would add to that is about input from others. I think there's a two-sided coin with that. Number one is, don't be afraid to get input. Don't be afraid. I remember when I first started writing, it was a secret to me. I'm like, I don't want anybody to tell me how bad I am. So I am not going to show anybody this writing. Therefore, I'm just probably magically going to get published someday. But so number one, don't be afraid of input. But number two, be careful about input. Look for common threads that you receive. Some people could be out there just to say you are terrible at what you do, but don't listen to that. Listen to yourself. Don't give up. Look for the common threads. Jenn was saying, point of view, I think, is what you were talking about when you were doing the contest and people pointed out your point of view. Oh, there's a common thread right there. I can work with that. But don't be afraid to get input on your writing. It will become very important at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about your writing process just a little bit. In mysteries, it's important that you actually solve the crime by the end of the book, or readers do get a bit cranky. How do you approach writing your books? Do you know in advance how things are going to fall out? Do you just kind of start writing and hope it's going to come together? Jenn?
This is hilarious because Paige and I come at this from two totally different places. So we're actually a good panel. I am a plotter. When I wrote my first romantic comedies for Harlequin, I didn't use an outline. I don't even know how I sold those books. Looking back, I'm like, why did they buy those books? Like, how did I manage that? I think it was more, it was long enough ago that you sent in a floppy disk and a paper copy. Like, there was no like attaching it to your email and saying bye. It was like, very nerve-wracking because my, Harlequin was based in Toronto. So I had to send it across the border, no less. But I forgot the question again.
Process. You're a plotter.
Thank you. So when I was, did I mention I'm on deadline? In the beginning, I didn't write off of an outline. And for me, it just became really painful. When you have the blank page syndrome every single day. I think some authors love that. It's a challenge. They're excited. And for me, it just made me like sick. I needed to know what I was writing. So I write off of a 10-page outline, roughly, sometimes more, sometimes less. I have a general idea of what's going to happen. I always know who the murderer is. And not that it doesn't change. Sometimes, even people who are supposed to die sometimes don't. It happens. But by and large, I work under such tight time constraints because I write 3 to 4 books a year that I can't really like just throw out the plot and start over. I don't have that kind of time. And I really try to put a lot of thought into my plot when I write it. And Paige is a plot buddy of mine, and so is Kate Carlisle. And the three of us will kick around plots and help each other, especially when we've killed so many people. And I don't really deviate. I check the plot every morning when I sit down. I look at my outline and where I'm supposed to go, and then I try to dive in and go from there. So it's about 10 pages, and I do know everything, but I don't know the how. Like even in this one where I'm struggling with the shooting, at the time that I wrote the proposal, it was like person is dead, but I didn't really say, oh, it's going to be guns this time. And then I started writing it. And anyway, so that's me. But then she's not like that.
No, I'm very much a pantster, but I have gotten a slight bit better, a little bit better. I usually start with a spark of an idea and a few paragraphs, and it takes me about 200 pages, and that's what I ultimately end up calling my outline. 200 pages in, and the story comes together in my head. I wish I could see the story for a 10-page outline. I'd give anything to be able to put a story together in my head like that. It just doesn't happen. I have to take it one page at a time to get to page 200. And then I'm like, oh, well, why didn't I see that before? This person's the killer. This person is actually who needs to die. And so it usually means I do an extra draft or two, probably more than people who plot things out, but there's just no other way.
As we start to approach something that looks a little bit like normal in our lives after a year of difficulties, as authors, do you think that you might be looking forward in the next year to possibly doing more in-person events? What is it like for an author now at this point in time, and what do you kind of see in the future for yourselves? Let's go with Paige.
Well, I do miss the in-person events. Poison Pen is so much fun. Every time we go there and do anything, it's just an absolute joy. And I'm not just saying that, it really truly is. So I do hope that does come back this year. The Zoom events, I think we're actually kind of really getting into the swing of them finally. I think people are enjoying them. I think watching them and participating in them is both fun. I mean, I don't have any shoes on, so that's you have pants on, but I don't have any shoes on. So, that's pretty cool. And I think there are good things about both. I think it will give us the new world of Zoom or whatever will give us a new world of people we can talk to and get to know. But I certainly hope in person comes back at some level, maybe even bigger level than Zoom.
Jenn?
Yeah, I'm the same. In fact, Paige, Kate, and I were just talking, and we're like, we're going to Left Coast Crime, and then we're going to the Edgars, and then it's like we're getting let out of a cage. For me, I don't think Paige is in the same boat. When the pandemic started, I had a college student at home. Suddenly, I had a high school student. I had a husband who used to go work, also working at home. And then there was me. And I went from having these days where, bye, everybody, have a great day, and now suddenly they were here and it was, hey, where's this? Where's that? And you're like, so, one of them has since moved out, and we just got word that the husband's going to be headed back to his job soon. And on the one hand, I kind of got used to working in the chaos, but on the other hand, I'm like, oh my God, thank you. Get vaccinated, people. I need these people out of my house. But anyway, so I'm very excited to do in-person events because I really do miss people, but I'm also just really excited to have peace and quiet in my own space because it's been a while.
I've found that most authors are also readers. So let's take a moment and talk a little bit about what you've been reading that you'd like to share with other readers? And I'll start with you, Jen.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. I actually have nonfiction this time. Well, I have a fiction too, but I'll share my nonfiction. I'm reading this one right now.
Really? Do you like it?
I do. It's I had a kind of a rough personally I had a rough 2020. So I thought, and I always like her book for writers out there. Anne Lamott wrote a book called Bird by Bird. And that was very inspiring. Yeah, it was very inspiring to me. So this one's been really nice. I mean, it's a lot of I've hit a certain age where you're kind of looking back at your life and the different crossroads and decisions made. And, I'm finding I'm reading a little bit more, not self-help, but more kind of like self-affirmation-y type stuff, kind of assessing the journey. And then the fiction one I'm reading, I just picked this one up. And I picked it up because I did a talk with her on Zoom for, I think it was East City Books. Feel bad that I can't get that right. Deadline. But it's funny, and Paige, it's set in Alaska.
Oh, lovely. Ooh, sounds good.
Well, and it's heating up here. I think we hit almost 100 today. I was like, I need me some Alaska. So it's a funny rom-com women's fiction in Alaska.
Now, repeat the books and the title, so read them out loud. Jen.
Oh, sorry. The Tourist Attraction is the funny rom-com, and it's by Sarah Morgan Taylor.
Okay.
And then the one that I was kind of talking about, Anne Lamott, is her new book, Dusk, Night, Dawn. So that's me.
Now, Paige.
Okay, I even wrote a couple down. So I read a couple of really brutal books, or I started one that was a true crime, and I had to actually put that one down. I couldn't even read it. It was about a horrific woman in the Pacific Northwest, but I'm going to get to the other one that was also brutal, but was fiction based upon a slavery experience, but it was absolutely fabulous. The Yellow Wife by Sadiqa Johnson, and pardon me if it's Sadiqa, I apologize if I'm not pronouncing the name correctly, but The Yellow Wife, it was spectacular, based upon a woman who was purchased as a slave by a jail owner back east, and she ended up having a family with this man. And in the fictional version, it talks about how she wants for her children freedom, and it is just extraordinarily well done. So I really, really enjoyed it. Faye Faraway by Helen Fisher. It's a time travel, and it was odd and strange and weird, and I loved every second of it. It was really good. So that's Faye Faraway by Helen Fisher. And then I also read Stephen King's Later. It's a recent book, Later, and I really enjoyed it. It wasn't super long, but I really enjoyed it. It was intriguing. It was from a kid's point of view, and normally I don't like that, but it was great.
Well, now I'll give one book suggestion for both of you because it's one of the best books I've read this year. It's called The Last Bookshop in London by Madeline Martin.
I've heard a lot of buzz. Yeah.
God, you will. I ended up going through half a box of Kleenex while I was reading it. But I cry at Hallmark commercials, so that doesn't say a lot. But,
yeah, me too. That's why I have photos.
It's set in London during World War II. A young woman comes to London because she's basically been kicked out of the family business after her parents pass away. She gets a job working through her friend of her mother's at a local bookshop there. It's 1939. The war is just about to start. She's not a reader. She has no interest in working in a bookshop. She's just doing it to get the experience so she can get a recommendation and move on to something else. But we go through the war years in London with this young woman, and the author doesn't gloss over the very real losses of what the Blitz was like for people there. I mean, it was not fun. It was a terrible time that people would spend their evenings in the subways and huddled in bunkers and things like that. But what it also is, it's a very powerful, moving look at the importance of books and reading in our lives, because as she's working in this bookstore, she discovers the joy of reading. She helps transmit that to other people. It shows how important books are during times of stress and during times of difficulty, and there is a thread of romance through the book. And I will say the romance ends optimistically, so romance fans don't have to worry about that. But it was the last bookshop in London by Madeline Martin. Really, if you love books or reading or London or World War II, it will tick off all the boxes for you.
All right, I'm writing it down.
Yeah.
We do have copies of The Poison Pen, Jen. Feel free to call and order one.
Yeah, that'll be that book John Charles told me about.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Now, before we wrap up, let's go ahead and tell us what's coming next for you as an author. And we'll start with you, Jen, because I think you have something coming pretty quickly.
I do. After For Better or Worse comes out Tuesday, the 5th, right? 4th? Okay, whatever, Tuesday. It comes out Tuesday. 6th, 5th?
No,
Yeah. 4th.
I think 4th.
Oh, my calendar's still April. So I was like, what? I'm like, is it the 6th? Anyway, May 4th. May the 4th be with you. Go buy my book, For Better or Worse. I should remember that. So that one comes out Tuesday. Very exciting. I am currently, the one that I'm struggling with is called Strawberried Alive. And that's the 14th cupcake book, which if I can manage to shoot enough people, will come out next spring. And then in August, I'm so excited about the book called Wait for It. Oh, I have the cover thing right here. It's the little card we have. Can you see it?
Wow, that looks like it's set in the desert, Jen.
Isn't it cute? It is. See my little cactus on the back. So this one's awesome. It's a women's fiction. This is a card if anybody wants it. It's called Wait for It. If you read Paris is Always a Good Idea, you know that Chelsea Martin had a exuberant younger sister named Annabelle. And the opening chapter of Wait for It is Annabelle is ducking a proposal from her first husband. Yes, she's 28 and married twice. So you can see what you're dealing with. So she takes a job and books it to Phoenix. So it was awesome to write a book in my hometown. And I got to put in all the things I love, like Tovria Castle and Durant's on Central Avenue and how you go through the kitchen to get to the restaurant and all that fun stuff. So I'm very excited for that, women's fiction. And it deals, it's a romantic comedy, but you have a heroine who's a pleaser and a fixer, and you have a hero who is suffering a kind of post-traumatic stress from having a stroke when he was only 35. And he's kind of crippled by anxiety, and she's someone who always wants to come in and fix things. So as much as they like each other, they have a lot to figure out and see if they can make it work. And it was fun to write, and I feel very fortunate that I had people in my life that shared with me all those things that made the book very real. So that comes out in August. And then in November, I have my next library lovers mystery called Killer Research. And that one's very fun. I'm actually doing the copy edits right now. And you could tell I was writing it last year because and I had set it up earlier, not intentionally, but for those who followed the series, there's an old school librarian that they nicknamed the Lemon, but her name is Miss Cole. And she kind of gets a wild hair to run for mayor. So this book is kind of a lead up to the election. And it opens up with, she's just gotten yard signs saying vote Cole, and she invites the Crafternoon group, the library lovers group there, to take some yard signs. Well, when they open the trunk to get the signs out of the trunk, they find a body. So that's my year.
What about you, Paige?
I have the third Alaska book coming out in December. It's called Dark Night, not with a K, so Night. No Batman in this one. And then the next Scottish book will be out a year from now, next April. And that's called The Burning Pages. I actually have a title, yes. And
Nice.
Robert Burns is the Scottish history part of that one.
Oh, that's great.
Well done.
Well, I can't believe how fast our time has flown by, even with the technical difficulties. So I'd like to thank Paige Shelton and Jenn McKinlay for joining us today to talk about their new books, For Better or For Worse, and Deadly Editions. And thank you both.
Well, thank you, John. Thanks, everybody there.
Yeah.
Hello, We hope you're enjoying our programs and podcasts with authors. We'd like to expand them, and your help would be appreciated. Please make a donation at poisonedpenfoundation.org. 100% of the proceeds will go to help connect authors with readers in this difficult time. Thank you.